Am I buying Erling Haaland? What am I doing with Salah and Bowen? And who is going to be my captain? This is my team selection for Game Week 21. Goalkeepers and defenders up first then, and looking at the clean sheet odds, I'm not massively confident in having double Tottenham defence, and I do have 2 free transfers, so I could potentially use one of them to bring in an extra defender. But talking about the rest of the defence first, Martinez in goal against Everton. I think this week he's probably almost as good as they come, really. I do think Arsenal defence is probably the way to go for a clean sheet, but not too worried about having Martinez in goal. Saliba, as I said, well, Arsenal, I think, I know according to Draft Time, they have the strongest clean sheet odds for Game Week 21. Double Tottenham defence, as I said, might do something about that. Dubravka on my bench has got Man City, so I don't think there's any justification to start him. I could well give Charlie Taylor a start against Luton, but I'd say question marks around his availability, and then I'm just going to have to stick with Jamal Lascelles for the time being. I think I have other bigger fish to fry in my team, and he's just going to have to stay. On to the midfield then, and I've got a couple of fires to fight. I'll talk through the guys that are just nailed on in my team. Palmer and Saka, I think, are fantastic options. Without Haaland in my team at the moment, I've actually got the captaincy on Cole Palmer. I think all things considered, in the players that I've got in my team, he's probably the best captain. Looking at his underlying numbers, he's the strongest midfielder in the game, bar Salah and Son, who are obviously, they're out for Game Week 21, and he takes penalties for Chelsea, and he's got a favourable fixture against Fulham at home. So I think all those things considered, without Haaland in my team, he's probably the strongest captain. Saka has been a little bit disappointing of recent, but he can just always pop up with returns, and you just know he's nailed on for Arsenal, plays 90 minutes on that right wing, and he is their designated penalty taker. Obviously might give some away, but yeah, I think he's probably going to get some penalties before the end of the season, right? And Palace, I think, is one of the best fixtures you can ask for at the moment. Bowen, he did unfortunately pick up an injury against Bristol City, which might worry some owners. To be honest, I'm saying if you're looking to buy him, I'll probably be a little bit put off by the fact that he picked up that injury against Bristol City, but if you've got him like I do, I'd probably hold him. When you look at his career as a whole, he did miss one game this season against Burnley with that knee injury he picked up on international duty. However, I think looking at his career as a whole, he's got 2 periods of injury, which were less than a week, I think, in duration each. I think he's going to be fine. And his fixture isn't for, basically 2 weeks. He will have a cup tie midweek next week against Bristol City. That game's been arranged for next Tuesday. But I think he's going to be fine for Game Week 21. Anthony Gordon, I don't mind him, although against Man City, I'm not massively comfortable giving him a start. And obviously with Salah on my bench, he is my priority this week to take out. I'm going to use one of my 2 free transfers on him, and I've actually got a list of players lined up to replace him next. So then, speaking about these Salah replacements, I've ranked these players by expected returns per 90, because that's a stat I really like to look at when I review players. And then you can sort of do a minutes calculation yourself based on basically a prediction of how many minutes they're going to play. Top of the list, interestingly, is Richarlison. Now, I do really like him as a Salah replacement. I think he could well be on penalties without Son in the team for Spurs. He's in good form. 9 attacking returns from 12 starts, and recently he's been in fantastic form. The one question mark I have over Richarlison, though, is just how good are Spurs, and particularly him, going to be without Son in the team. I just think Son added so much to that Spurs team, particularly playing on the left wing, Richarlison playing through the middle. Yeah, I just have a little bit of a question mark as to how good Richarlison is going to be without Son in the team. One thing I would say, I don't think he's going to be back in Game Week 21, but I've included him on this list. Maddison could well be back for Spurs in the next couple of weeks, so that could increase Richarlison's appeal, but I mean, ultimately, we don't have any confirmation when Maddison's going to be back. And yeah, just without Son, I've got a little bit of a question mark on Richarlison. I do like the look of Diogo Jota. His injury record recently, though, is not great, although I do think he's probably the favourite to play on the right wing in place of Mo Salah for Liverpool. And yeah, I think there's definitely a big question mark on who takes the penalties for Liverpool when he goes. Probably going to be Darwin Núñez, though, in my opinion, rather than Diogo Jota. Odegaard is always a solid option, plays 90 minutes every game for Arsenal, although he is playing a little bit deeper this season than the number 10 role we saw him play last season. Foden, yes, he's a good option, in great form recently, but with KDB and potentially Haaland coming back in the fray for Man City, could he be benched in a few fixtures? I do like Pascal Gross though. His returns are not groundbreaking by any stretch of the imagination, but he's playing every game for Brighton. I believe he's on penalties when João Pedro isn't on the pitch, which happens quite regularly, to be honest. And yeah, they're in good form at the moment, Brighton, and have a good set of upcoming fixtures. So I think Gross has the less doubts about them of players on this list, if that makes sense. You know, he's fit. Most of the Brighton team are also fit, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter if they are. He seems to play well regardless of how Brighton line up. And of all of the outfield players in the team, probably with the exception of Lewis Dunk, he is the most nailed. Now, I could go a little bit cheaper, get Garnacho in at I think he's 4.9 million now. I think that's a great price for what he offers. He's obviously not going to rip the world up when it comes to attacking returns, but you know, most people, including myself, have Archer as their third striker. With a view to bring Haaland back in, it makes sense to swap Archer for a midfielder of a like-for-like price and go 3-4-3, and Garnacho could be the man to enable that. Alanga and Gibbs-White, I think, are decent options. I know Forest have impressed in some games, but I think it's more due to how poor the opposition they've played have been rather than how good Forest have been. I think, you know, Newcastle and Man United fixtures they've had have been quite kind to them. Just my opinion, though. You might think differently, but I think my two guys I'm eyeing up, well, I'd say three. Richarlison, Gross, and Garnacho. Now, with all of those things considered, I think I'm going to go for Pascal Gross. He looks to be the most nailed outfield player for Brighton, bar I'd say Lewis Dunk. He just keeps popping up with returns really consistently. As I said, he takes the penalties without João Pedro on the bench, and Brighton have some really nice fixtures coming up, right? They've got Sheffield United in there, Luton in there, Crystal Palace in there, Tottenham, who I wouldn't rule out a goal against, and then Wolves in game week 21. I just think that's a lovely set of fixtures over the next 5, and I wouldn't be scared to start him in all of them. I just think he's a nice, safe pick, and if you don't fancy him for a particular game week, I wouldn't have any issue benching him. All right, on to the forwards then. I've currently got Watkins, Solanke and Archer with my 8.3 million in the bank, and Salah, who needs to go. I think you can tell what my transfer plans are going to be with my forward line. I'm really happy with Watkins and Solanke. I think they're probably two of the best forwards in the game at the moment, but I'm not happy with having Archer as my third forward. You can probably guess who I'm going to bring in his place. That's, of course, Erling Haaland. He's definitely the best player in FPL when he's fit. He should be back, in my opinion, for game week 21 and has a lovely fixture run from game week 22 onwards. He's obviously nailed to start for Man City when he's fit, takes their penalties, and I would say Man City are just entering their sort of title running form that we see from the winter period onwards. And yeah, I just think he's the best player in FPL when he's fit, right? And I think it's worth taking the risk. If we just go back to my team a second, I feel like if I do Salah to Gross and Archer to Haaland, I still have Gordon who can go on my bench. So even if Haaland's not fit for game week 21, I get Gordon going in his place, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world. So I might as well buy him now with a view, if he is benched in game week 21, I mean, I don't think he's going to play at all if he's not featuring. I don't think he's going to come off the bench for a cameo. I think it's a start or nothing. So it makes sense to go to my bench if I need to and bring in Gordon. So yeah, I think Haaland is going to be a transfer in. I'm just watching this back in the edit and I thought I'd share a few more bits of info about Erling Haaland. Now, he has been pictured in training. Pep Guardiola himself has said that he's now completed 2 to 3 training sessions. I think that's positive news, and ordinarily I think if a player's completed 2 or 3 training sessions, they'd be in the starting 11 for that week. That just seems to be the trend that we've noticed from other FPL assets. Although we will get, I imagine, some early Man City team news, and if we get it, it will probably be coming from 1 or 2 accounts on Twitter. First one being FPL Main Road and the second being FPL Tony. I'd recommend giving them a follow, watching their feeds before the deadline, and we should get some Haaland, hopefully some Haaland news before the deadline. Another question then is who to captain in game week 21. Now, I'd say if we get positive news that Haaland is fit and in the Man City team for the Newcastle game, he's obviously the best captain. But I think it'd be useful to look at other options, particularly if you're not looking to bring Haaland in yourself, or of course, if he's not confirmed to be in the starting lineup. There's plenty of other options you can go for. Well, I've picked 6 in total, right? Cole Palmer, I think, is my favourite outside of Haaland. I've spoken about him already, but I just think he's such a solid option, guaranteed to start for Chelsea. He has the best expected returns per 90 of all the players you can go for, bar Erling Haaland. Yeah, he's on penalties for Chelsea. I just think he ticks all the boxes of a good captain, really. I put Saka in second place. Probably not quite as good as Palmer on recent form, but he is the penalty taker for Arsenal. Equally as nailed, and he can pop up with the return in any game. Tony, I really like him as a differential. I think as differentials in FPL go, he's probably as safe as you can get. And he did score a hat-trick in an under-23 game he played in the weekend of the FA Cup. So he seems to be fit and firing and ready to go, basically. You could go for Foden and Alvarez, but I just think the Newcastle fixture, you can trust Haaland in it, I reckon. But Newcastle just beat Sunderland. They've had a little bit of a rest period as well. So I think they could be back to their former strength, and particularly at St James's Park. We know how good they can be. I'd back Haaland to score there, but Alvarez and Foden, I think, will have a tricky game. Trent, I do like him. As I said, you can, get attacking returns, clean sheets, returns through 3 different means for him. I put there, 7 clean sheets, which doesn't really apply to other players. I'm just not massive on a Liverpool clean sheet against Bournemouth, basically. That's the only thing that would put me off captaining him. So if I were to give an order, I'd say Haaland is the number 1 if he's fit, Palmer is the number 2, Saka is the number 3, and Tony if you want to be a bit different. I thought it'd be useful just to have a look at how the fixtures are shaping up as well following the FA Cup fixtures, and these are all courtesy of Ben Crellin. I just wanted to pay a bit of attention to game week 29, which I think is going to involve some blank game weeks, essentially. So we've just had, I believe, round 3 of the FA Cup. So for this to line up in the way of a blank game week, we need these teams to win 2 more FA Cup fixtures to get into round 6. But looking at all these teams that are in there, you'd expect Man City, Tottenham, Liverpool, Newcastle, and probably Chelsea to, go forwards in the cup and potentially, as a result, have a blank in game week 29. It's obviously all to play out, but we could be potentially seeing a rather big blank game week in 29. Obviously, it depends on how teams get on in the FA Cup. So in terms of chips, we need to be cognizant really of how we navigate that game week. You could dead end your team into this game week, play a wild card in game week 30, or you could just use your free hit in 29, depending on which players are out and which teams are out. But yeah, I think we need to be cognizant of this because it's going to be important in a few weeks' time. Another bit of news, and there's obviously no confirmation around this yet, but it does look like we're going to get a double game week in game week 25. This will either involve Man City and Brentford or Liverpool and Luton. So yeah, question marks on who's going to double. Although I would say that definitely makes Man City assets more attractive because I think by the looks of what Ben has to say, they're more likely to double in 25. And of course, makes you wonder, you're going to need a plan to bring Salah back into your team, basically, particularly if he has a double game week in 25. These are not confirmed yet. Ben Crellin knows what he's talking about, though, when it comes to fixtures. So definitely recommend checking him out on Twitter and listening to what he has to say. But yeah, for the moment, I think it's just something we have to bear in mind. All right, then, with all those things considered, this is how I'm going to line up in game week 21. Now, I'm going to use my 2 free transfers to bring in Haaland and Gross. I'm going to bench Anthony Gordon. Currently, DraftHound are not predicting Haaland to start. That's contrary, obviously, to what I believe. He is in training, so I do think that's, improves his chances of starting. Basically, I think it's a really tough fixture, and Pep would be, if he's fit, Pep would be silly to leave him out, in my opinion. So the expected points figures don't currently count Haaland's points in there because he's predicted to get 0 because DraftHound say he's not going to start. But you can do your own expected points calculation for that one. I'm reasonably happy with this team. The one thing I would say, my defence is a little bit shaky. I'm not confident in Spurs keeping a clean sheet against Man United, but I do think that Porro and Udogie could well get some attacking returns. And I think the issue of bringing Haaland in is more important than bringing Trent in because ultimately I'm going to captain Haaland pretty much every week, whereas Trent, he's going to be there, but he's not going to be my captain. So for that reason, I think my priority is finding a way to bring Haaland in. So Trent, unfortunately, you're going to have to miss out. All right, and that's the end of the video. Hopefully you found my decision making and thoughts there useful. Let me know in the comments what you're planning to do with your team in game week 21. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rating, subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there, and I'll catch you in my next video.